Welcome back to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast, back down to Extreme Land again. So now this is just incredible. Shane Douglas, Todd Gordon, and now somebody that played a pivotal role in ECW as well. And in my book, someone who should already be in a certain fame of Hall of Fame, that is. It's the ECW legend that is Francine. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
We are very excited to have you on. Like we say, a massive array of ex-ECW talent. Something that was very difficult. I always tell the story. I told it to Todd last week about in England, like we didn't really get ECW. I know it was difficult in some cases in America to get it, but in the UK, we would have it like a month or so behind, and it was like we would be out in a pub or a club. And look at the time, it'd be like, right, the pub's closed, we need to get home because it was about 2 o'clock in the morning over here.
Right.
So it's like get out of the club, get in, get like a burger or something, get back home, and then we can watch ECW. That was
I I love that. Yeah, and it was the same like in I think the New York market got us at 2 a.m. Like a lot of the markets were 2 a.m. So
yeah,
people would go and drink and go to their, established bars or whatever and get their food and in a drunken stupor just come back home and watch our product. So thank you for tuning in.
it was great. It was. We wish we could have seen it in real time. Now, another question that I asked Todd that I'm actually going to start with you was nowadays with streaming and everything else, because obviously you hardly had anything back then to be able to do that. Would ECW like be thriving today if there was the streaming element available way back when?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
One of our problems was we had our first program, Hardcore, the
Yeah.
syndication Hardcore TV, very, very popular. We pushed the limits, pushed the envelope, did a lot of crazy stuff on that show. And eventually you're going to get bigger. So next came pay-per-views and then came television deals, which was TNN, which was our downfall, by the way, in case you didn't know. But I feel like if social media was around and, YouTube and all these streaming devices and Fight TV, and we would have had a home somewhere and we could have continued, onward and upward. And it was just hard because money was sparse. As well as I do, Paul was taking from Vince McMahon to supplement the pay-per-views, and that was $250,000 every pay-per-view. It was just hard when the workers weren't getting paid, but we were still showing up every week. And I just feel like if there was another outlet that didn't cost any money that we could have utilized, we would have kept going and eventually got back on our feet and, started to thrive again because we had such a great product. And 1999, 2000, even though TNN kind of had their thumb on us, I feel like everybody was in their prime and we all evolved. Paul took most of us, I should say, not everybody, but a bunch of kids who didn't have that much experience, and he made them into huge stars in the wrestling business. So 7 years later, everybody finds their footing, and then we go under. And it's just like there was so much more to be done. So yes, I do feel like if there were outlets for us to utilize, like the internet and so forth, we definitely could have stayed afloat a lot
Yeah.
longer.
I definitely agree with that, and it's a shame. But actually, but Todd did say, and I hope it does represent with you that when you hear the ECW chants now, it still brings a smile to your face because that was you for you.
Absolutely. I recently did NXT
Yes,
for
yes, you did.
WWE,
Yeah,
and being in the arena again and having all those younger kids chant ECW when any of us came out or did something. It's surreal to me because it's how many years later, 25, 30 years
yeah,
after the fact, and we still get ECW chants wherever we go. It's very nice. It's very humbling. They used our theme song that evening
yeah.
for the opening of the show,
You did.
and myself and a bunch of the guys were in the back, and I said out loud, Oh my God, I just got chills. Like because I'm in the arena, I'm hearing it's like the start of one of the shows back in the 90s. And all the guys were like, "Oh, I have goosebumps. Oh my God, I'm freaking out." And it was so weird, but at the same time, it made me really, really happy.
Yeah,
So I'm flattered by it. I love the fact that we have a new fan base from WWE putting us on the Peacock network.
yeah.
A whole new generation gets to watch our product from day one. And Shane and I, especially, we have fans come up to us at conventions all the time and they say, "Oh my God, your angle with Gary Wolf was so great." And they're like 12 years old. You know what I mean? So a whole new generation is experiencing our product, and it's something. It's something because you don't get that with the other promotions. And I'm not putting the other promotions down by any means because I was a fan of like WCW and
Yeah,
Global and all that kind of stuff. But you don't hear people chanting WCW. You hear them chanting ECW. So it's really special to be a part of that. I'm so proud to be an ECW original.
yeah.
I really am.
That was some night. Just missed like Joey Styles coming out just to
Yeah,
top
for
it off.
sure.
NXT. You kind of mentioned you was at NXT. Any of the ladies at NXT that you would have seen, would like to have seen down in ECW back in the day that you
Oh my
saw?
gosh, so many of them. There was I mean, listen, I could be their mother. They're all in their like 20s, right?
Yeah,
Um, but there's so much talent in that locker room. And it was pretty cool because at first they had asked me to do the referee
yeah.
spot, and I couldn't do that because of the surgeries. I
Mhm.
can't I'm slow and methodical these days, so I didn't want to look bad. I didn't want to get down and have to miss counts and stuff. So I said no. Then they called and they wanted me to do the backstage interviewing. I had laryngitis, so I had no voice. So Shawn Michaels told me to look pretty and stand in the crowd, which that's what I ended up doing, which was fine. It was great. But I got to sit front row and I got to watch
Yeah,
the ladies in action for that 10-person tag.
yes,
And my gosh, they have so much talent there. And I got to talk to a lot of them in the back, and they all have really good attitudes, and it seems like everybody gets along, which is
yeah.
great. So, very pleasant experience there, and I enjoyed myself that evening. So it was a good time.
Excellent. I would have liked to see something like Stephanie Vacquer or Julia down there with you girls tearing it up.
Oh yeah, that would be. I mean, again, they weren't even born at the time,
No.
but it would have been great.
It definitely would have been.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that because everyone says like women's revolution and they say, oh, it was Becky Lynch and Charlotte, and they was, oh, it's TNA, it's Trish, and that. And now I always throw into the like equation. I'm like Francine was taking like power bombs through tables in like like the mid 90s. Like, do you get? Is it just sometimes a little bit? Do you get a little bit frustrated that you're not in that sort of conversation a lot of the time? It's always them girls. When you girls just were going crazy in ECW, not necessarily wrestling like every week, but you were doing some crazy stunts down there.
I feel like maybe we get left out because we weren't billed as female
Yeah.
wrestlers. We were managers, valets, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the girls weren't trained at all. I started by thinking I was going to become a female wrestler, and then Paul put the kibosh on that and was like, "No, no, no, you're going to be a manager. Female wrestling doesn't sell." And this is, remember, again, this is the 90s,
Yeah.
and he says, "You're going to make all your money being a manager, and we're going to do some cool stuff with you. Trust me." And I said, "Absolutely. I'm green. I don't know any better. I don't know anybody in the business. I'm learning as I go." So I pretty much stopped training and I learned on the job. But I feel like maybe a lot of people don't take us into consideration because we didn't do matches per se,
Mm.
although we did do a lot of mixed tags
Yeah.
back in the day. And sometimes we did singles matches, but it was few and far between. It was a lot of being on the outside and jumping in when our men needed help. And getting that big spot of the night and the big bump being taken. So I don't feel slighted, but I do wish that overall ECW got more credit by a lot more people for what it brought to the, to the wrestling community. So,
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, I go back and I say I remember watching the likes of Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Guerrero, Benoit Malenko, people that before we even saw them in like the WCW and WWE, because sometimes people only know Rey Mysterio from WWE because that's where they grew up watching. And I'm like, I remember him doing a Hurricane Rana, I think off a balcony with Psychosis or Super Crazy during an
yeah,
ECW. They were like, what? And I was like, come, let me show you this. But again, I don't think ECW gets the credit. You're right in what you're saying, even with the women, but even with some of the men, though, as well.
right. Overall, yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people refer to us as that blood and guts company. I've
Mhm.
heard that so many times. And while that might be true for parts of it, because the boys did their share of bleeding and
Yeah.
barbed wire and whatnot, like you said, there were so many good technical matches, and people don't realize that we had a great mix of everything.
Yeah.
We, technical comedy, um, the women cat fighting or getting beat up or whatever you want to go. It was a good hodgepodge of everything. So for, a wrestling fan to sit there and to watch a program and maybe we only featured maybe two or three matches on it, but you got a little bit of something in each match. And I think that was the draw
Mm.
and what made us different than everybody else.
Yeah, agreed. I wish we'd have that over here in the UK. They only seem to do like UK strong style now, every promotion, and there's no variety. And maybe because I'm
Mm.
old, I don't know, but I just I love when I go to a show and you've got a lucha, you've got a female, you've got a heavyweight, you've got a tag, you've got those varieties, and I think especially over here in the UK, it's missing that because
Mm.
everything is like uber competitive and I'm one of these guys where if you book your champions, most times out of 10, you have to book your champions strong. And like they are in these matches where they nearly lose the title every time. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how I
Yeah.
was growing up watching it. So they could learn a lot from watching ECW, not just for the blood and guts side, but for the whole round product. Just had that bit of everything, which is what I personally loved about it anyway. But it wasn't without its fair share of some crazy angles. You mentioned the Gary Wolf one, and Todd Gordon told the story of he actually come into Todd's place with the neck thing on and saying, I could take this off. And he's like, no, no, not yet. To make that bit of realism. Like when the Sandman got blinded, he stayed at home, didn't answer his phone. There was that realism there that I think is missing today. We don't see enough of that today.
Yeah, well, Gary really broke his
Yeah,
neck.
he did. Yeah,
That was a legit injury.
yeah,
I think he might have played it off a little longer than he needed
yeah.
to, but it was a legit injury. I remember one of the first times it might have been my first ever time. I took a choke slam from 911 at a house show, and they put me on a gurney and they put the neck brace around me and they took me out the back door and they put me in a car and I went straight home. And so I didn't even go back up to the locker room and I didn't even know if I had a job. Like I was like, did I do well? Like, somebody called me the next day and said, "No, yeah, that was great, blah, blah, blah." But we tried to keep it as old school and, kayfabe back in the day, right?
Mm,
Tried to keep it hush hush and didn't let the fans know too much and this and that. Today, I think, now with all the documentaries that are out and behind the
mm,
scenes footage and stuff like that, you can work a match with me. And then 2 minutes after the match is over, you and I are taking selfies in the back and saying, what a great match we had. When overall, if you're carrying on a feud, you're supposed to hate each other. I see that a lot. Not so much, on the bigger feds, but like in the indies.
mm.
And it kind of takes a little bit of the magic away, even though I think the fans are smarter these
Yeah,
days. Um, but back then, and even before my time, the 70s and 80s, where they used to have heels in one
yeah,
locker room and baby faces in the other, and you never even saw each other,
yeah.
and if you had to plan the match, I guess you would go meet in a secret spot or something, but they came out of their respective locker rooms, and that's the way it was. Um, so I think, again, even though we know it's choreographed. I'm not going to say fake. I hate when
No,
people use the word fake.
it's not
We
fake.
know it's a predetermined outcome and it's choreographed. I still miss the days when heels were heels and baby
Yeah.
faces were baby faces.
Yeah, you
You
mentioned
know,
a good point about going back to the 70s and 80s because the fans then were very rabid in some cases, in some areas. I remember I've listened to Jim Cornette a few times and when he was talking about times where the fans nearly got involved, but I don't think there was any more rabid fans than the ones that were ECW through and through, the ones that were there. They were crazy. I mean, how many times did it nearly get out of hand at an ECW show?
oh, I mean, when somebody punches a girl
Yeah, yeah,
because they don't like, which would be
yeah,
me, um,
yeah, yeah,
that wasn't too fun. We used to have the Dudleys on the mic invoking riots all the time.
yeah.
I remember one night, Shane and I were in the ring, and he could be very mouthy on the microphone as a heel. And uh, I looked at him. I don't remember what the topic was, but I look at him and he's got this little nick on his forehead and he's bleeding. And so I tell him, like, hey, you're bleeding. And the next thing I know, we're getting pelted by coins, which, if you ever felt a quarter bounce off it hurts.
Yeah.
And so literally we had to like duck and cover because and I'm like, can you throw bills instead? Don't throw. They were literally throwing coins at us because they hated us so much. And then another time, somebody, I was in the ring and I might have been cutting a promo, and they started throwing chairs at me in the ring. I mean, I love a passionate fan, but I mean, there's a line that don't cross the line. I always said you can call me whatever name you want, but please don't touch me, don't punch me, don't spit on me. Like that kind of behavior is just
Mhm.
too much.
Yeah. No, they
I
were
don't.
very rabid. I even when the WWE sort of brought it back in '05, we'd done the one night stand thing, and I remember Cena coming out, and oh my God,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, I was thinking if they're going to be, I was praying that he wasn't winning that against Rob Van Dam,
Right,
because if he wins, I'm not sure because I know Cena and a bit like Roman Reigns now, when Roman Reigns sort of changing the subject briefly, sort of beat the Undertaker, he got a lot of stick the next night on. I mean, they literally took 20 minutes to cut a promo because he couldn't get a word in.
right.
Had Cena had got beaten Van Dam, I don't know what I dread to think what would have happened.
I think people would have threw their children in the ring at him if they were there. Yeah, because there were plenty of signs that said if Cena wins, we
Yeah.
riot type of deal, and those fans are rabid. So yeah, I get it. Again, love passion. I love, people wanting to be a part of the show, so to speak. But there's a line that you cross. I know a lot of times going to the ring, you get the hands that come
Yeah.
through. We always had Atlas security and they were great. But a couple times a hand would slip through. And one time I had my dress ripped off. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's like, come on, guys, just relax. Um, but that's how it was back then. So
It was crazy. The fans for me, they were. Do you ever? I mean, obviously there wasn't. I think someone would bring a lot of signs, but do you ever remember there was a specific chant that you heard and you just kind of tried to not to laugh inside because it was like hilarious.
so many. I mean, they're especially at me.
Yeah,
I know, I mean, the most famous one is probably She's Got Herpes, which I
yeah,
was just like, where did that come from? I don't even remember the first time I heard that, but that was a great one. Um, there were some I can't mention here because they were very rude
Mhm.
and crude.
Yeah,
I know the night that we did a spot right after the Tyson Holyfield ear
yeah.
incident where he did his ear. Paul thought I should bite Terry Funk's ear. And so, so I go and I bite his ear and he gigs his ear. And when I lift my head up, I'm covered in blood. And they started chanting HIV.
It's like,
I was just like, good Lord, but I didn't realize how much blood I had on my face And I didn't know Terry was going to gig his ear either. But and now I don't know. Yeah, that did make television. Yeah, it did make television. But I mean, ridiculous stuff. But sometimes I remember I would look at the because more of the buildings were intimate,
Yeah.
and you could like relay. And I would go, "That's a good one," and they then you would get the little chuckles from the crowd because they would say things I never heard before. I'd be like, "Oh, that's original. That's a good one. Never heard that before," you know. But they were very creative.
Oh, I can imagine that they were. I don't doubt that one bit. You had a lot of, you were valet to a lot of them at the time. Obviously, you had the Shane Douglas, you had Justin. I think you turned on more people in the Big Show turned in his career, I think, right?
Probably did. Yeah, because I didn't, the baby face gimmick was just not, I mean, look, I just love to work, don't get me wrong, but being a heel was a million times more satisfying than having a baby face role. So I'm pretty much when I was with Tommy, that's when I was a baby face.
Yes.
But I think I did my best work as a heel.
Definitely. I think I don't know. I think a lot of people I talk to prefer the heel persona. I think that just, I don't know, it's just one of those things that you
But
get.
fun.
What quick question? Because I read, and I did this with Todd. I said there's a couple of things I'd read on the internet that I wanted to know if it was true or false. And I
Okay.
read something today, and I wanted to know if it's true or false for you. In '92, was there ever discussions of you going to WWE and being Sister Love with Bruce Pritchard?
So that was not in 1992.
Ah,
I started in 93
gotcha.
training. I trained right in the back of the ECW arena. There was a ring set up, and that's where I trained. I guess it would have been maybe late 94, 95, something around there. I started getting phone calls and from the office, and they were telling me that they were looking for somebody to work with Bruce because the women that they had now, they were, I don't know if they were getting from like a local strip club or just local girls that were in the area, but it was a different woman in each town,
Mhm.
and they wanted somebody, I guess that people would recognize, week to week the same person accompanying him, and it was just pitched. Yeah, you wouldn't have to bump like you're doing now. And I was just like, oh, but I like what I'm doing now. I'm trying to get over and be one of the boys, you know? And they just kept telling me you're going to make so much more money. And I would say, okay. And then I would be on the road. It was the gentleman was Ed Cohen. So he would
Yeah.
call my house and he would speak to my mother. And so I would come home and my mom would be like, oh, that nice man Ed called and he said you would make so much more money if you worked for WWF instead of Paul. And I said, of course he did, you know? So I kept it hush hush for maybe a month or two. And then I started feeling really guilty. And I went to Paul and I said, listen, and I told him everything. And like his face kind of dropped. And he was like, well, I don't have their money. I can't compete with them. And I said, oh, I know that. I said, but can I get a raise? And if I can get a raise, I'll stay. And he goes, yes. And it wasn't a lot more, but I said, okay. And that was all I needed. And then I called Ed and I said, not interested, and I stayed where I was.
And you've
So,
got a hell of a career out of what you was as well. That was it. Do you have a favorite person that you worked with at ECW? And we mentioned, yeah, I think Shane probably would have been the one, maybe. I don't know.
well, Shane and I still work together
Yes, you do.
31 years later. We're still doing conventions and shows together. I was blessed with a great locker room. The guys really were wonderful to work with. Um, I loved everyone dearly. The one that stands out the most is probably Chris Candido.
Mhm.
He was such a dear friend, but also one of the most easiest to work with because he liked to call things on the fly and he didn't like to go over the matches a lot in the back.
Yeah.
So, I would sit with the guys and I would listen to everything from top to bottom, and I wanted to know where my spots were and I want it to be ready 2, 3 spots beforehand. And I also wanted to know because if they needed help, if they needed a chair, if I had to get a table, this, that, and the other thing, I wanted to know what was going on, right? But Chris would always tell me, don't worry about anything. I'll just say, Francine, get me a chair and you go get the chair. So I never had to like freak out and stress about forgetting a spot because he would just tell me what to do and never go over anything. And a lot of the guys like to go over the match step by step and, but Chris wasn't one of them. So it was pretty easy working with him. And plus, he incorporated so much gaga into his matches that it was always like he would always pop me and I would always laugh when we were together because I managed him a lot too, him and then Bam Bam and the Triple Threat collectively. And it was just like, it was always like a good time with him. There was no stress. It was just fun, you know. But again, I just loved everybody that I worked with. So I was lucky.
Indeed, you was. And if I remember rightly, when you near enough when you first come, when you were like a devoted fan of Stevie Richards.
Yeah, they had me as like Stevie Richards' girlfriend, and I was a plant, so they would put me like in the front row. And I'll never forget the first night. It was just like there were no women in the crowd, and I come out and like all these men are there, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so scared." And people are trying to talk to me, and like they're touching my arm and they're touching my hair, and I was like, "Ugh, what am I doing?" you know but the security was right there and it got over. I mean, I there are worse ways to start, let's put it that way. So it was a fun introduction to ECW, but it didn't last long, and shortly I jumped over the guardrail and all hell broke loose and I got to work, so it was fun.
Yeah, definitely. So I need to ask is the one of the guys that's got a really great mind that I know I think you ended up leaving Tommy Dreamer to go was Raven.
Mhm.
He seems like I mean I don't know he's every time everyone I speak to from ECW days are just like the guys they even come out and say A his mind was incredible but B he never got to perhaps where he should have got maybe a bit like Shane Douglas in many ways. Shane may have been from a different reason, certain people maybe. But Raven, Raven himself, I still don't understand why he didn't get world champion in, say, for example, WWF or WCW because he was that good.
Yeah, you can always chalk it up to maybe politics. I don't know backstage stuff with Scotty. I'm not really sure what happened. I do know he was a tremendous talent
Yes.
and he did have a great mind, does have a great mind for the business. Um, yeah, I don't know if he had heat with anybody in the back. You would have to ask him because that's something I don't
Mm.
know. I do know that Paul pushed him to the moon in ECW, and that's where
Yeah.
he really had his chance to shine. And the same with Shane. They were both huge stars in ECW, but not so much elsewhere.
No, I think Shane's. I think I know that maybe three letters in the WWE may have. You may have
Well,
seen him quite recently,
I
funnily
just
enough.
saw him. Just saw him actually, but yeah, that's Shane's battle to fight,
Yes,
and
that is indeed. Yeah, I think he did. I think he did mention that when I had him on and we was talking about those times. But also, you were a playable character in the ECW video games. Is
I
that
was.
surreal to see get in a video game with you're there you are.
Yeah, it's crazy. I show my kids because my kids don't like wrestling, and I'm fine with that. 100% fine with that.
Yeah,
Like they're
yeah,
not into it, thank God, right? But once, like, if an action figure comes out or something happens, I'll show them, and they're like, "That is so cool that you got to do something like that." And I'm like, "It really is kind of cool because I remember going to do the voiceovers for
Mm,
it." And as I'm doing the voiceovers, I'm saying, I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be in a video game or, now have action figures put out or be on a magazine cover. Like, I did not aspire to do any of this. Like, it kind of just fell into place for me. And if you interview a lot of these guys and maybe even the girls, they'll say, well, I knew I wanted to be a professional wrestler since I'm 5 years old or whatever the story. No, I did not want to be in the business at all until maybe I was 19, 20, and that's exactly when it happened. So it was like boom, 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 here I am. There was no build up to it. It was just like, I'm changing professions. This is what I'm going to do. And this is what I did, which is crazy to me because it's not that simple for a lot of people, you
No.
know? And looking back on it, I never would have dreamed that I would have been so lucky as to be in a video game or have an action figure or anything like this. It's surreal to me.
That
And
is
I'm
crazy.
very, very blessed.
Yeah, that was crazy. I just couldn't imagine. I mean, obviously, it never happened to me, but to just watch the thing go, "There's me," like
Yeah.
on a TV. I mean, it's bad enough when you obviously when you watch it back sometimes that there you are and you're doing what you do. It is crazy. But you did have a stint after ECW in NWA TNA briefly. No, too.
I did. Yeah. So Bob Ryder, God rest his soul, he had
Mm.
called me and he was just like, hey, there's a new company starting up and explained, it's at the fairgrounds and people have to pay like $10 to watch it because that's what you had to do back then. You had to pay to
Yeah,
see it, pay-per-view.
yeah,
Um, but they offered me like a 4 night contract. And he said it's basically what everybody's being offered. You either get like a 4 night deal, or I think you're going in and like for a night and seeing how it goes and this and that. And I was like, yeah, sure, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And
mm,
they were kind of talking it up like it's going to be the next big thing, and I was just like, okay, well, I need somewhere to work,
yeah,
let's give it a go. And I went there and I liked it there. I really liked it there. I liked the locker room. The problem was they just didn't know what to do with me, I guess. And I had Jerry Jarrett telling me, like, we don't know what to do. And I'm just like, well, put me with someone, or you pitch ideas, and it just for some reason it didn't work out. I don't think I had any heat or anything. It just wasn't a good fit at the time. Um, I think I probably should have been brought back later when management changed. Maybe I would have had a better shot at getting a spot there. But I enjoyed the 4 weekends that I was with them. It was a lot of fun.
yeah. It's a weird. I would have thought like when it closed, when obviously ECW did finish up, I was like, there was a few people I was, you kind of write down that you would expect to see. Obviously potentially WWF or WWE, and like you were obviously it was Van Dam, Rhinos, and all them. And I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, where's Francine gone?
So, funny enough, they did call me
Oh, I did.
as soon as we went bankrupt and closed. I got the phone call to go over there, and I had to send in my pictures and do all this stuff. And Paul was the liaison for that, Paul Heyman.
Yeah,
And the problem that I saw was the way it was pitched to me. I was going to be the manager of X Factor. And so X Factor at the time
yeah,
was Albert and Just Incredible. I don't know if Sean Waltman was involved at that point. I can't remember. I know it was PJ and it was Albert.
yeah,
Maybe Test. I
yeah,
can't remember who was, but anyway, they were going to feud with the Hardys and Lita.
yeah.
And so Paul was saying, we're bringing you in and you're going to be on Raw and you're going to take Lita's Hunan Kanrana. And I was petrified only because, it was live television. I'd never taken it before. And he's like, you can practice. And in the back of my mind, all I kept saying to myself is, they're going to send me down. Was it OVW at the time? I
Yeah,
don't even know.
OVW. Yeah, yeah,
I said, they're going to want me to wrestle and I don't want to wrestle. I want to do what I'm doing, managing what I did for Paul for the 7 years I was there. And now nobody said I was going to wrestle. This is just what was
yeah,
embedded in my brain, because the pattern with those girls is they would start off doing one thing and then they would all go into the wrestling roles. And I was like 30, 31, something like that. And I was like, I don't want to start over. I just don't want to have to start over. So I never went.
Hmm.
And that was that.
What a shame. I know I get why you're doing it, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a big mistake on my part. I will never know. Um, but I didn't, I don't know, like something in my gut just told me don't do it. And then, and then years later, I get another call and we're opening up ECW again. And I call it the fake ECW.
Yeah.
But I said to myself, this is probably the last chance that I have to make any type of money in this business because what was I, 34? You're
Mhm.
getting up
Yeah.
there at that time, you know what I mean? So a bunch of us got, I remember Axel Rotten calling me and saying, "Are we going to do this?" I was like, "I guess so. Do you want to make money? Should we try?" And and that was a complete failure and not what I expected. I tried, and maybe that same scenario would have happened 5 years prior. I don't know. I have no idea, but I did get a phone call in 2001. I just never really pursued it.
It's interesting now looking back because you talking about you wanted to be a valet and basically doing what you were doing in ECW. It seems to be like a dying art now. We rarely see this anymore in wrestling. Like it's just more like two guys. Yes, you see it a little bit if like you got the Judgment Day and Liv Morgan comes out and she's got Raquel Rodriguez or something like that. But that what you had or what you was doing in ECW with that valet and getting involved, getting a I don't know gored or power driven or things like that that seems to be like non-existent nowadays. Do you think that's a
It,
bad thing or do you think that's a good thing?
it's a lost art,
Mm,
100%. I think it's a bad thing. And here's why. When you have anybody, whether it be one or two people on the outside, for the most part, something's going to happen with them.
yeah,
And if it doesn't, then they're not being utilized correctly, in my opinion. Every time when I would go out there, the fans knew I was either going to get my ass kicked or I was going to try and kick someone's ass. That was just basically what my character was. It added, I think, another element to the match. Um, Now, a lot of the guys might say, well, we don't need that in our match. And maybe you don't, you know, it's not for everyone. Not everybody needs a manager or a valet by their side. But I just feel like when there's two girls out there, the fans know, something's going to happen. If two girls were out in WWE and they started catfighting, that place would explode.
yeah.
Because as much as they love women's wrestling and women's matches, every guy likes to see two girls rolling around with each other, and you can't say you don't. Come on now. So I just think it adds a different element. It could evolve storylines. A love interest could happen. Like there's so many ways using a female manager could enhance a talent and make the matches better. And it is a lost art form, and there's not many of them out there. And I don't know why. I don't know what happened. I feel like in WWE they just turn all the women into female wrestlers, and that goes back to what I just said. Getting that phone call. If I were to have done that spot with Lita, 99% I would have probably been facing her in some kind of match down the line, and here I am now, a female wrestler, and there goes the manager spot.
Yeah,
Probably not 100%, but probably.
man.
So I don't know. I enjoy when I see manager. Even then, I enjoy when I see them on the outside. I think it adds an extra element.
Gone are the days of Bobby Brain Heenan
Oh,
and
so
people like
good,
that.
right? So good.
Even Paul Heyman. Although he done it, he slightly adapted his role with obviously the Bloodline stuff, which was just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
incredible. That was really good. But
Right.
I want to go back to ECW, and I'll go take you back to when you're in there, and you hear Metallica Enter Sandman. I
Uh,
can't. I mean, I've been fortunate enough in the UK when he come over here and done a tour, Sandman, and we were on the balcony that he walked out on, and you get that. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it, singing the song, and he's knocking a beer over his head and he's whacking his head with a cane, or even a fan done it at One Night Stand once. He got the cane, didn't he? Whacked himself over the head with it. But being in the ring with that, or like when a New Jack music hits, something that's so. What is that like being in that ring? 'Cause it must feel electric when that happens.
Oh, for sure. The one thing, I mean, this is just me, but the one thing I hate about the long entrance by like the Sandman, and it, believe me, the fans love it. It's great. It's 8 minutes of just pure insanity, and you love it. But think about this. Your friend is in the ring dying, and you're going through the crowd drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette. Like, wouldn't you just run and help your friend? Like, that's the one thing. I'm just like, this is so stupid. But nonetheless, being in the in the crowd or at ringside or whatever, and you hear that music, and especially if you're a part of what's going to happen, oh, it's the best thing ever. The One of the greatest things is when New Jack would come out. Now, I got to work with him a couple times, I believe, being out there, and we used to play his music the whole
Yeah, whole way
time.
through it.
That
Yeah.
I loved. And I saw that done recently in AEW. I believe it was maybe Brian Danielson. They might have played Final Countdown like the whole time he was out there wrestling or
Yeah.
something. I know they can't do that for everyone, but I enjoyed that immensely. Like, I thought that added such a good vibe to everything, and it was fun. Maybe because I like the song, I don't know. But the same with like New Jack. Like when I was out there, and I remember just being there, and it was so loud, and just hearing the music and watching the guys work, and me being a part and having a spot while that music was playing. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. You know what I mean? Like just hearing certain theme songs when you're out there, like I don't know. And maybe it's because also that we used music that we weren't supposed to be
Yeah.
using.
Yeah.
So it made it that much cooler. You know what I mean? Like nowadays you watch it on the network or whatever, and it's like elevator music and it takes away. It's not as fun, but
No, it definitely
you know,
worked that night when he was over here. It was just it was incredible to be able to just because you never dream, obviously, because obviously ECW, we never really got the opportunity to, obviously it never toured over here in the UK or anything like that, so we never really
yeah.
had that moment. And when he was there, I mean, it was Raven was there. Steve Corino, we'll get to him in a minute, actually, because I'll have
Uh,
a story about him, and I know you've got a couple as well quickly. I was just going about long matches. You said about long entrances. Could you ever imagine like the Sandman of ECW against an entrance of the Undertaker?
oh gosh, just the entrances would be 16 minutes. The fans would be like, "All right, let's go already."
You got 20 minutes and 16 of that's going to be the entrances, boys.
Entrances are a show in themselves, you
Oh,
know.
definitely.
Like I said, as much as they add to the product, it is kind of silly if you think about it when they're trying to like do a run in to save somebody, but they have to go around the whole building. So
I never forget one in AEW you just mentioned when Matt Hardy was getting beaten up and they played Jeff's music and he was dancing on the stage. It's like, man, you
why would you dance when your brother is getting the crap kicked out of him? It makes no sense. But hey, it's a spectacle. It's a
it
show.
is. It is.
Yeah.
Need to talk Steve Corino. So the story that I've got was I actually escorted him out of the building in Doncaster in the UK. He was the same man was on the show and we come downstairs at the end and he was in the bar area and I don't know if it was his first wife. I don't know. But we just my
One of them.
friend I can't remember. I mean I don't know. This was like I don't know 20 odd years ago I think now. My friend was talking to his wife in the bar during the interval of the show, and then like because obviously the show had finished and everyone was congregating around, and he just come over to us because we were still talking to his wife at the time. The rest of us had come down. He was like, "Can you get me out of here?" I was like, "Sure." Come,
Yeah,
we take him out. But anyway, you had a succession of matches with Steve in ECW, and
did.
you ended up beating him. I think nearly every time.
I know. I apologize to him every time. I mean, I pinned him on pay-per-view. How
Yeah,
bad is that? I just saw him in NXT
yeah,
because he works
yeah.
backstage. And I told him, I was like, I have to apologize again. And he's like, it's fine, it's fine. I mean, he's a dear friend. Um, I loved working with Steve. We were part of the Philly clique. We always flew together, traveled together. We were always, stayed at the same hotels, hung out, and I just didn't want Steve or any of the guys to resent me
Mm,
for what Paul, made me do to
mm.
them in the ring because I was this little girl who was kind of like a Superman. if you think about it, you know what I mean? And yeah, I took my share of licks, but in reality, should I have beaten up so many of the men all the time and them selling for, you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you, again, it's a show and I understand it, but I just, because they were my friends, I just didn't want any animosity. And some of the guys don't look kindly on the women in the business, but thank God Steve just rolled with the punches and he didn't care. And he was just so good to work with. And I love Steve, I do. And I was fortunate enough to have him as a partner for so long. And I think we played off each other great. Towards the end, I think the final promo that ever aired, I was supposed to join forces with him and Jack Victory. And we were so excited about that, but then it never happened. So, always was against him, but never worked
Weird.
side by side with him. So that would have been fun to do. But, you know,
That would have been actually quite fun. And
yeah.
his son nowadays is such a good wrestler. I watch
Yeah, Colby.
NWA. Yeah, Colby.
Yeah.
Every time I see him, I'm like, you're so your dad. Like
It,
visually,
it's like a mirror reflection of his father. Yeah.
literally, if Steve looked in the mirror, it'd be him. And I was like, he's a great wrestler as well. But look, final question, Francine, before I start wrapping up. I did mention, and I mentioned it in my intro, the words Hall of Fame. Now, last year, WWE, look, it was in ECW, territory. Yes, we know Paul got inducted, and rightfully so. If that call was to ever happen, number one, wait, and it should happen, by the way. There's no two ways about it. But A, would you accept? And B, who would you want to induct you into the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it will ever happen. Um, if anything, we all thought that ECW would have be put in as a group
Yeah.
in April, but that didn't happen. I was very happy for Paul, much deserved. But hypothetically, if it were, I mean, I don't believe I'd say no. I Who would say no? Like I
Vince Russo would.
Okay, well, I mean, it's and it's a payday, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, but I think if anybody should induct me or most of the boys, it should be Paul
Mhm.
because he's the one that molded us and made us the stars, you know, that we are today. And I always say this, like he took a 20-year-old girl who had no experience, didn't know any wrestlers, and gave me the ball and let me run with it and listen to my ideas and was not only a boss but a friend. And I'll never bury Paul. I'm very grateful for what he has done for me because if it wasn't for Paul, you and I would not be sitting here right now.
No, indeed.
Point blank. There's no way I'd be sitting here. I probably would have never got into the business. And I thank him for my career. So yeah, I'd probably pick him.
I think that was a good pick as well, and I mean, I'm glad that he took a chance or he got you involved because we would have had so many great ECW moments, which you can still see on Peacock if you live in America. Us over here in the UK, we don't have the WWE network coming up in a couple of weeks because it's going all Netflix for us.
Ah, okay.
We lose all of the stuff, all of that great stuff that at the minute, I don't know if it's ever going to come on Netflix. I don't know. But
Mhm.
we will be seeing it all on Netflix. But Francine, I'd loved talking to you. It's been so great to reminisce from some of my favorite stuff in childhood happened in ECW. So A, thank you for coming on, and B, thank you for giving us the career that you've given us in ECW. We wouldn't have been the same without you.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And if I could just plug one thing really quickly,
Of course you can.
I have a podcast
Yes, you do.
also. It's called Eyes Up Here with Francine, and we are on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Also a YouTube channel if you want to go look that up. But a lot of the guys have been guests on my show, And so if you want to come on over and listen to some of the craziest interviews you've ever heard in your life, because we talk about a lot of the things that have not been talked about before. So if you want to come over and give us a follow or a sub, I'd appreciate that. But I appreciate your kind words, and it was a pleasure to spend this afternoon with you today.
Thank you very much. And coming up, guys, on the Hitting the Turnbuckle channel, we've not finished with ECW. We still have at least one more ECW guest,
Ooh,
that being the enforcer, CW Anderson.
I love him.
He'll be coming on
Love
at
him.
the other side of Christmas and the New Year. But Francine, yeah, like I said, it's been great having you on the show. It was great reminiscing ECW. Have a great Christmas. Have a great 2025. And who knows, if a convention in the UK comes up, you and Shay need to come down and say hello to us.
I would love to. You have to tell those bookers to get me out there because I've never been to the UK, and I
Never.
would love, I'd never, no. So I would love to someday travel and meet you in person.
Yes, me too. Well, I know some wrestling bookers. I don't know. I have
Well,
to.
let's get it going, man.
I have a male and female championship over here in the UK on the sea.
Ah,
You know, so although I wouldn't trust Shane, he might throw it in the bin um, or
no,
form the
no,
floor.
no, no.
Or
He's
whatever.
more laid back these
Yeah,
days, so
he
he's
is.
good. Yeah.
But guys, don't forget, check Francine's podcast out. Come and check us out, HTT Buckle on X, HTT Buckle on YouTube, Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast on Instagram. Until next time, everybody, she has been the Queen of Extreme, Francine. I have been your host, Adam Cousins. You have been watching the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. Buckle down, stay safe, and goodbye.